After writing So Long and Thanks for All the Fish for the Hitchhiker's series, Douglas Adams' next plan was actually for a pair of books. He said that the moment when he most felt like writing a novel was when he'd just finished one. So this seemed logical to him, even if he was notoriously tardy with them. This had been something he'd been kicking around during that period, actually, and it does make sense given the earthbound nature of So Long that he would continue to explore stuff, for the most part, closer to Earth and still fantastic. The main female character even had a few similarities to Fenchurch, a relationship with the male lead, plays the cello, and is exasperated with her brother. Not a lot of commonality, certainly, but it seemed appropriate to note the connection, seeing as that's what this story is all about. This work was also easier on him because the company that released it this time was not Pan. Not that Pan was a problem for Douglas, but as he noted, hardback publishers are accustomed to dealing with authors. They have systems in place to deal with them when they're late or troublesome. There's no such system with paperback companies, usually because they're dealing with something already published. So whenever Douglas was tardy, everything went to hell rapidly. Now he had the chance to get things just right, which is good because he needed it with this story, and also because it wound up being so late they had to typeset it on Douglas's own Mac. It's quite clear this is a story that Douglas finally needed to tell. Not specifically this, but rather the idea of it. Douglas was a very funny man, and of course he was very intelligent, but the Hitchhiker's books had limited opportunity for him to showcase the latter. While Hitchhikers had been about comedy rather than parody, the nature of its comedy demanded that it take over. With Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency, Douglas had the room to be funny when he wanted to be, rather than forcing himself to be funny because he needed to be. So this was an entirely different experience from writing the Hitchhiker's books. It was very carefully plotted so that Douglas had to work within a framework, and the humor would have to emerge from within the framework, rather than seeing what direction the story might be leading him. This was similar to how things were with Life, the Universe, and Everything, of course, but Douglas had found that frustrating, so how does this make sense? Well, it comes down to the nature of the two series. With Hitchhikers, the outrageous is normal and exploring it is interesting. With the terrestrial Dirk Gently, the outrageous doesn't fit. The book has the fantastic, but not the outrageous, and that's an essential distinction to make. Hitchhikers is a world gone mad, so imposing order frustrated Douglas. Dirk Gently is an ordinary world with the extraordinary in it, but unobserved. The extraordinary needs to be kept in check, or else it will dilute the effectiveness of it overall. Parts of the plot will be drawn from two of Douglas's stories for Doctor Who, City of Death, involving an alien whose mistake caused his ship to explode and thus begin the process of evolution on Earth, and the incomplete Tom Baker story Shada, involving a Professor Chronotis who is a Time Lord who is a professor at Cambridge and his rooms are actually his TARDIS. Chronotis will be lifted whole cloth from that story without explanation for his incredible longevity or his having a time machine. He is so old that new memories push out old ones and he can't recall. While these are tremendously important parts of the story, there is much more to it than that. The interconnectedness of all things is an extremely convenient tool for the author, as I said. It's tied in strongly with Richard's hobby. Richard is a computer expert, and remember, this is 1985, before the age of weekend warriors. At the moment, he's using all of his resources to try to figure out how his couch that was being delivered could get stuck in the staircase, with no way to move it forward and no way to move it back out again. That, of course, should be impossible. That's why he's trying to figure it out, without success, despite the fact that he is a skilled programmer. He created a spreadsheet program that could present your data in any way possible, including, for a laugh, as music. Well, this turned out to be genius, because that was made the centerpiece of the entire program, and it's called Anthem. Yes, Anthem is indeed incredibly popular, much beloved. Clearly, we are dealing with a world of science fiction. This was such a huge hit, in fact, that Richard needs to create the new and improved version for it, only he's become intrigued at what the implications of Anthem are, and he's been trying to find a way to use patterns in the natural world to generate music. His attempts are often feeble, even when he tries cheating and putting them in G minor. But nevertheless, this is a principle that he believes in strongly and has gone to great lengths to fail at it. Richard wrote an article in the magazine Fathom where he explains this idea. This article takes up several pages of the book to explain the idea of how music is numbers, how all things in nature are numbers, and so the one can translate to the other. It also offers a strong examination of the implications of all of this, about the role of emotion and how it translates and places us within nature, and other philosophical topics. And this, incidentally, is a time when Douglas can be serious rather than funny. Hence, this is something that he didn't normally have room for in Hitchhikers. And given the depths to which he explores this, one gets the impression that this is something that has weighed on Douglas for some time, and he's had a chance to really express it, to explain his view of the universe. He describes music as, quote, the most abstract of the arts. It has no meaning or purpose other than to be itself. And when he talks about how reducing music to numbers is decried by some as diminishing emotions, he argues that the things which emotionally move us are things that can be described with numbers. Again, quote, that's not a reduction of it. That's the beauty of it. Douglas's exploration of the idea not only allows him to speak of his wonder, both on an intellectual and emotional level, with the natural world, but it in turn serves as the explanation for the holistic nature of Dirk's world. Everything in the world is connected. Everything works together. And when Richard finds himself on the alien ship that has taken all the data on the natural world and turned it into music, the sheer beauty of it is so overwhelming that he passes out. The world we live in, us included, forms a web that is literally harmonious. The book begins with the explosion, though without a full explanation of what we're witnessing or its significance, and then moves to another example of Douglas's wonderful imagination. This present so early on may have been to comfort Hitchhikers fans who weren't sure what they were going to be getting into. It's the story of an electric monk, the reasoning being that a dishwasher washes dishes so you don't have to, a video recorder watches television so you don't have to, so an electric monk believes in things so you don't have to. This particular one is malfunctioning, though, and so was sent out into the desert on a horse to believe whatever it liked. It enters the events because a door appears on a rock, and the monk is compelled to believe it will be there. We piece together that what has happened is Professor Chronotis, Reg for short, is here because he's been on an errand, prompted by the ghost who brought him here so it could find a monk, since they believe in anything. The monk comes because it finally believes the door is the way, capital letters. Significant because the door does lead him to the way. Gordon Way, to be specific, whom the monk murders with Gordon's own double-barreled shotgun after misunderstanding that someone was being metaphorical at him. It's a monk's job to believe, after all. The curious point about him and the horse, of course, is that despite being built on an alien world, they look like a human being and a horse. Why is that? It's not stated, but this likely also ties in with the main theme, because the ship that came here was on a mission of peace, love, and harmony, and the electric monks on board believed it, believed in that cause. The mistake the ghost made was that it entrusted the proper working of the ship to a monk who believed that launching was the right move, when it in fact blew up the ship. But it was the right move, because it created a world of harmony after all, and appropriately, the beings that would one day walk its surface would look like the monks themselves. Those who truly believed that they would have a home here really would, in a sense, for their kinds would dominate the planet, a species that often struggled for something to believe in. The reason Reg was brought here was because he and Richard were at dinner, the Coleridge dinner at Cambridge, and there was a young girl with a pot that she'd found in Greece, which was nothing special. Reg, disgusted that the other professors were yanking away the sense of wonder from this child, did a conjuring trick whereby a salt cellar wound up inside the pot. No one but the girl is impressed, only it wasn't a conjuring trick. The ghost got him to use the time machine to put the salt cellar in the pot centuries earlier so that it could swing by to pick up the monk. Now, as we've established, with Dirk, he accepts the impossible over what is extremely implausible. And so he has pieced together that ghosts do in fact exist. We follow the tribulations of the spirit of Gordon Way, in fact. They do so because of something unfulfilled, and their possession operates similar to post-hypnotic suggestion. You can get someone to do something that they are inclined to do anyway, but not disinclined. In the case of possession, once this has happened, the two beings are linked together like the halves of a zipper. The ghost attempts to get this control over Reg so that it can use his time machine to undo the explosion, but it can't get control of him. It tries to do this by getting Reg to travel back in time to save the dodo, something Reg wants to do but has to stop himself from doing because the dodo went extinct only because he used the time machine to prevent the extinction of the coelacanth. If he would do it again, he just condemns some other species to extinction. It once again shows the interconnectedness of all things. Since Reg won't undo the past, it enters Richard to try to get him to alter the past in another form. In his case, prompting him to make a promise to his girlfriend Susan Way, Gordon's sister, which is saved on her answering machine. To save his relationship, he climbs dangerously high up the outside of her building to get in the window so that he can wipe his message from the tape. This is how he is spotted by Dirk and sets off the latter's investigation. In the end, Richard refuses to steal the tape, preventing the ghost from linking with him, so it enters that of Susan's date for the evening, Michael. Michael is a wealthy man who feels sorry for himself and thus lacks the will to really resist the ghost tempting him to do what he wants. In this case, to commit murder, since preventing the evolution of life is to murder everyone who has ever lived. Dirk pieces these things together even as Michael and the ghost make their plans and arrive at Reg's place to plead for a trip to put things right. But it's misleading them. It knows that preventing the explosion will wipe out humanity and all other life forms on Earth from existing. And when Dirk pieces it together, they have to stop it. Only it's outside in poison air, so they can't do like in City of Death and run over and punch it. So instead, they do the next best thing. The instructions on how to repair the ship are recorded in detail in Coleridge's poem Kublai Khan. This is a real poem. It is read at the dinner, which includes the second, far stranger half, which does seem to sound like the events described in the opening as seen through that of an opium user. So they travel to find Coleridge, and Dirk interrupts him in the middle of the poem, so distracting him that he completely forgets how to finish the poem. If you're not familiar with the poem Kublai Khan, there was supposed to be a much longer version, but the real Coleridge really was interrupted by someone from Porlock for about an hour, by which time he'd forgotten the details of what he was going to say. In the world of Dirk Gently, this eliminated the second half and meant that when the ghost arrived, it wouldn't have the instructions on fixing the ship. With the human race saved, Richard wants to take Susan to a restaurant that you have to have a reservation for 3 weeks in advance. To pull this off, they travel back in time to Richard's apartment building so he can call the restaurant. While he's doing that, the furniture delivery guys arrive and ask if they can step into the room to help get the couch up the stairs. Otherwise, there was no way they could get it around the bend. Of course, once they realize they can't and the door is gone, there will be no getting it down either. This means that their time travel escapades caused this problem in the first place, because the ghost only entered Michael because Susan went on a date with him, which she only did because Richard forgot about her, which he only did because she'd moved back to her place because of the sofa blocking the staircase. Again, everything is connected. Even the restaurant. Its name is Esprit de l'Escalier, a famous French term for the perfect comeback you think up too late. But its literal meaning is staircase wit. The book is not only smart and funny, but the colorful characters are wonderfully engaging. Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency is a great read, and it's no surprise that it has had not one but 2 television adaptations given its interesting premise, along with radio, comics, and others. It was also clear Douglas himself had tremendous fun because the ending promised that the tale is to be continued, which we'll see tomorrow with The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul.